Hey guys, it's Mike here, and in this video, I'm going to be reviewing Ant-Man and the Wasp. Ant-Man and the Wasp is a sequel to Ant-Man, which came out in 2015 and was directed by Peyton Reed. Taking place roughly 2 years after the events of Captain America: Civil War, Ant-Man and the Wasp find Scott Lang in a down-on-his-luck situation where he is under house arrest. However, as his time on house arrest is nearly up, he begins having dreams of the original Wasp. He's once again recruited by Hank Pym and Hope Van Dyne in order to help rescue the original Wasp from the quantum realm. Now, I like the original Ant-Man. It was a movie I had low expectations going into, and I think a lot of people shared this sentiment, especially after the behind-the-scenes drama with Edgar Wright. However, Marvel did a good job with the film. After Avengers: Infinity War, another Ant-Man movie following it up seemed like a diversion or something to fill time, especially after we learned that it would take place before Infinity War. However, upon seeing this movie, it ended up being better than I expected, and surprisingly, I think I liked it even more than the first one. Paul Rudd once again reprises his role of Scott Lang in this movie, and we learn about what happened to him, Hank Pym, and Hope after Civil War. It didn't turn out well for them, as Lang is on house arrest and they're on the run from the FBI. Rudd is funny in this movie and serves largely as a comedic relief. This is especially the case in scenes when he's having a sort of out-of-body experience and gets to show off his acting range. That being said, I feel like he's not portrayed as very competent in this movie compared to the last one or Civil War. He oftentimes messes things up or is completely out of his element. He was a little like this in the prior movies, but they played it up a lot more here. Evangeline Lilly reprises her role of Hope Van Dyne, and we get to see her as the Wasp, and she's really badass here. She's presented as far more competent than Lang, and pulls off a number of cool moves using the shrinking and enlarging powers, which are a real highlight of the film. And she has her own emotional arc during the film, surrounding her past with her mother and getting over some of the problems she's had with Scott Lang, especially considering the events of Civil War. Michael Douglas also returns as Hank Pym, and we get a more personal story with him this time, as the film revolves around rescuing his wife from the quantum realm. Pym in part blames himself for her loss because she had to shrink down to defuse a bomb, which was shown in the previous Ant-Man movie. However, Pym originally wanted to do this himself and was unable to. I like his story in the film, and I really like Michael Douglas in this role. He really lends a lot of acting credibility to this movie, very similar to how Robert Redford gave Winter Soldier credibility with his own role. And of course, Michelle Pfeiffer plays Janet Van Dyne, the original Wasp, and she's good from the parts of the movie that she's in. There's a number of flashback scenes in the film where we see she and Douglas are younger, and the digital de-aging looks great. I'm not a fan of de-aging and altering actors with CG, but it was super realistic to the point where you could barely tell it was an effect. It's really come a long way since Tron Legacy with Jeff Bridges, and even Rogue One with Grand Moff Tarkin, and I could only imagine in time just how far they can take this technology. And Michael Pena also returns, and he's really a lot of fun in this movie, just like the last one. He now has a security company, and he and his friends have some funny scenes during the film, just like in the first movie. As far as the villains go, the main antagonist is named Ghost and is played by Hannah John Kamen. She has the ability to phase through solid matter. It's something we've seen in other comics in the past, such as with The Flash. However, hers is more along the lines of those programs from Matrix Reloaded. However, as a villain, I feel like she's one of the weaker elements of this film, since her motivations and general character really aren't as interesting as some of the prior villains in the MCU, such as Thanos, Killmonger, or Loki. After Infinity War, mine, and probably a lot of other people's standards of villain has risen a little higher than normal. And that's generally one of the problems with this film, because we also have another antagonist played by Walton Goggins. I'm a big fan of his from Django Unchained and Hateful Eight, but in this film he's not really handled as well. His character really could have been any actor. There's also an FBI agent played by Randall Park, who is after Scott Lang, and he's portrayed as being kind of awkward and again comedic like many of the other characters in this film, but again he's not really interesting on his own. But overall, I enjoyed these villains a lot more than the villain of the first Ant-Man. Now, there's some really fun action sequences with the shrinking and expanding powers, as I said before. The way they use this power is really entertaining and clever, such as the chase scene that we see in the trailer, where they use a Pez dispenser as a weapon, or even shrink a giant building into what looks like carry-on luggage. All these abilities don't necessarily have clear rules or always make sense, and this could be said for the quantum realm as well, which is really cool looking and a fascinating environment. However, there was a number of questions that are raised in this film about it that we don't necessarily have answered by its end. And some of the dialogue, especially the exposition, is way too on the nose and ham-fisted at times. There's a few too many scenes where the characters are basically just acting like exposition dumps to tell you what happened during the past 2 years and what everyone has been doing. I'm more of a fan of show it, don't say it in movies, and if you're going to say it, you should at least find a more entertaining way to do so, like in the scenes with Michael Pena. And finally, there are some end credit scenes for this film, but the mid-credit scene is the only really important one, and it's a big one. I figured because of the time placement, they would do something big during the credits scene in this film, and it really delivers there. So overall, I really liked Ant-Man and the Wasp. Now, it has some problems, but so did the first movie, and overall, I think I might like this one even more. It's not quite as good of a movie as something like Infinity War or Winter Soldier, but it's still a lot of fun and a movie that I would recommend checking out, especially if you're a fan of the MCU. Although, like the other MCU films at this point, it's not exactly one you can just walk into and know exactly what's going on. I'm going to give Ant-Man and the Wasp an 8 out of 10. So what did you guys think of Ant-Man and the Wasp? Have you seen it? And if so, do you like it or dislike it? Let me know down below. And if you like this video and you want to see more, then make sure to stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future.
Yeah, and you better subscribe, enable those damn notifications.